Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Dutiful Future. Today's guest is the fantastic and infamous student journalist,
Oh God.
Evian Swen, multiple award winner, former news editor for The Ball. Hello.
Hi there. Thank you for the
Hello, welcome. Today I have everyone on to talk about her fantastic article, which I would encourage everyone to go read alongside this, a letter to the class of 2020.
yeah.
What was this article about?
It's basically kind of just mourning the fact that the class of 2020 has been through kind of a lot more. Well, a lot of like challenges that we didn't expect at all before when we were starting university, and then that's yeah, and then the cuspid is just like looking back at the past 3 years and just seeing the best bits we can pick out from it, and obviously work wasn't exactly stellar, and the best part was its people, and that was kind of the focus of the entire piece. The fact that we all pulled through this together, and we have a few months left, and we will also pull through the rest of it together.
So to really understand, I guess the crux of the article, which is obviously the like for example, like graduation being cancelled due to coronavirus, or most likely going to be cancelled. Um, I guess it makes sense to sort of establish the basic journey up to this point. How would you describe your time at Warwick?
I was wow, actually
It's a tough
I've never
question.
thought of it that way. I
Mm.
think it was a really good learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how else to put it. I don't want to sugarcoat it, and at the same time I don't like exactly bash the uni. But it was, first year was kind of. I think that the way to see it, the way to describe it is that I went from a place of complete ignorance and just naivety to a point where I just knew too much. Um, but knowledge is power. So you get some kind of relief from knowing so much about the uni, and you're kind of relieved to go, but it's kind of the people that's only keeping you there. So that's how I describe it. I mean, I did enjoy it. There are hard times,
Mm-hmm.
but personally, because my department's really good, I had a great few like social circles. I'd say I did enjoy it in the end. Not for work itself, maybe.
So to describe the situation, to say to someone who wouldn't be a university student, that don't really understand like what the issue is of like losing graduation, they would just say like, "Oh, you're just using a big party." What would you say to them, and how would you describe this sort of loss that the class of 2020 has had?
I think it's really easy to like when I was writing the article, I was very conscious as well. This is coming from a place of privilege of being able to graduate and go to and have a university education in the first place. But that doesn't discount from the fact that there's this massive cohort of people, like thousands and thousands of students in the U.S., even like internationally around the world, that are losing this opportunity. That a lot of people, maybe they're like first time, the first generation to go to university. They're missing out on this experience, which they've been looking forward to. Making their family proud, feeling
Mhm.
validated, or feeling just that you've completed this chapter of your life that's a closed book, and it's this book that you would keep rereading as you grow up, as you enter adulthood. I think it's like it's just when you have so much expectation, and you just have all this hope for that one moment. It does seem like a big party, but at the same time it's also saying goodbye to everything that you've this comfortable environment, and actually stepping out and outside, of everything you ever known, into a new place. Like going to university was part of that, but you're still in this environment where you're learning with everyone else. Whereas when you actually go out to, like, quote unquote, the real world, you're completely unfamiliar to, let's say, like the concept of like doing your taxes, or having to like pay for your own, like earning their own bills and then paying for them every single month instead of relying on your parents. Like all these things that you don't actually get a lot, like the cohort didn't get to experience that, and then a majority anyway, and then afterwards they are having to do all of that. I think it's this
Mhm.
last hurrah is what graduation's like. Just a chance to kind of breathe and just look back at everything and feel complete, and then saying, okay, I'm ready to take on whatever else is going to come on. And that's kind of how I view graduation. But I mean, kind of all over the place now. Everything just feels like it feels like you've started tying a ribbon, it just stopped, and it's just going to stop forever,
Mhm.
and you just can't pick it back up anymore. That's kind of what it feels like.
So you brought it up there, the concept of hope, which is something which is quite prevalent throughout the article. And one of the quotes was, "Hope was like religion." So, what sort of role did hope play throughout your time, and how has that impacted this loss of the final ceremony and a completed story?
I'd say, because everybody's university experience is really different. And obviously I got to know the university in this intimate sense from, interrogating them about like a whole host of things. Um, but, the idea of hope was that, so going back to the university journey, obviously my first year was a bit of a turbulent ride. For those who actually saw me when I was in first year, I mean, I feel like I'm in a better place now. But then, it's just, in first year, you're thinking, I have 2 more years to go. This year doesn't count. So I'm hoping for another chance to actually feel better again. And then afterwards, in the second year, then I joined the newspaper and everything. And, you enter this new environment. You have all these people who are really eager, and you find something that you love doing, like, journalism. And it's just this great time. And then, when I became news editor and everything, and then I was like, elected for, I just hope that I can actually make a change. So it's just like this constant hope that you're going to achieve something new with every year that comes around. And it's just it was just feeling like there's something to look forward to when you wake up in the morning. And that was kind of the religious aspect of it, just waking up and feeling a sense of purpose, like you have something to achieve that day, that's going to impact the like tomorrow. And that was kind of what hope was for me. And then it was just this constant train of hope. So I think a really good example is just waking up in the morning, like I said before, and just feeling like, okay, this is what I need to do today, and this is the way I'm going to do it. But then now, I wake up in the morning and there's absolutely nothing to look forward to except the fact that I'm going to be stuck in the house. You find yourself obsessing over like completely menial things like cooking, or just like counting the hours, maybe watching like too many films and your eyes strain and you try to go to bed, but then you just can't anymore because you've been sleeping too much. That's kind of what life feels like when you don't have hope, that you've just kind of lost that sense of purpose, and you've lost that feeling of wanting to get up and wanting to do things. So yeah, it does feel it's quite bleak. It feels like suffocation. But that was, when you felt suffocated before, in the past 2 years at uni, you have something to think about, that oh, I'm gonna go on this trip with my friends to like on this tour or whatever, or oh, today I'm gonna go to the gym. Like sometimes I used to take that for granted, and now it's just it's just a different story. So yeah, that's the concept of hope for me, and a lot of it does come from the fact that I binged Star Wars over Christmas. And it was great. It was a great morals you learn from Star
We're
Wars.
stuck in the mind. You also another interesting quote was, if this year and the past two have taught me anything, it's been to not have hope. So you sort of described the negative impact and the bleak impact of having this hope and then having it crushed.
Yeah.
So how is this a concept that you aim to sort of apply to your future life, or do you think it is possible to live without having hope?
I don't think so. I think hope is this thing that you hang on to because like just believing in some small aspect that you're gonna achieve something, even if it's a small tiny thing. I think it's what keeps you going. It's what like wakes you up. It's what energizes you. And I think in the future, okay, well, if there was a future for me, given the fact that internships and grad schemes and everything that I was trying to apply for have now all been either postponed or canceled, which is great. But I think in the workplace, like if you had any kind of like work that you actually loved to do, you would have a sense of hope, and you would feel like, I'm waking up this morning because I look forward to having this, to doing this thing, to like helping this person, or just to help myself. I feel like that was really important for me, and the reason why I put down that hope was like religion, that hope was that university taught me not to have hope, was it had to do with more aspects of the things I learned from being a student journalist. That the uni could disappoint you so many times for so many different reasons. That's why I didn't have hope in the uni, but I do have hope in the people. I think that's, yeah, where you place and direct your sense of hope, and that sense of being hopeful is really important, because you shouldn't be putting it on something that you can't rely on. You know,
Hmm.
putting hope in someone that you truly believe would be able to pull you out, or a situation that you'll genuinely will improve you, is kind of what hope going right is supposed to be like. Whereas, you know, the past 2 years, there has been some misplaced hope here and there.
Hmm.
And yes, it is a chance to look back now that you're in isolation and nothing else to think about. Yeah.
And yeah, you know, right after that line, you sort of uplift it a little bit by talking about how you're not going to be taking things for granted. Do you think
Yeah.
there's a sort of connection or a sort of like support system between these two concepts where you can reduce how much you rely on hope by not taking things for granted? I guess living more in the moment.
Yeah, I do think living more in the moment is something that's really important. I genuinely, I do think, you know, you only when you've lost something, then you realize that you've taken it for granted.
Hmm.
And it's this really horrible, this really ineffective way of learning things, because you need to go through some kind of trouble to know that, oh, I had this before and now I don't have it. And but it's also the best way of us actually learning things, because it has such a huge impact on you emotionally and mentally, and kind of, you know, it really changes your outlook on life. So I think, yeah, the two kind of balance things out. Taking things for granted is really hard to spot when you're doing that. It is only when you're not in that situation anymore, you can't take that thing for granted, then you realize, okay, this is where I've gone wrong. Um, so yeah, I think treating things like it might be the last time, or taking things really seriously, because, for example, during Christmas, when, you know, I was back in Hong Kong then, and then in the news it was like, yeah, China has a few cases of pneumonia in this one province, and, you know, things aren't going very well, but, you know, it's just a few cases, just like four
Hmm.
people have like are sick, and now it's turned to a global pandemic. I think, as well, taking things incredibly seriously, especially just being able to recognize that there's a threat, and that that, you know, it doesn't just apply to like politics or like countries or whatever. It applies to just knowing what you do, what you're doing has a certain consequence, and just considering that very carefully. I think is something that, you know, our cohort will take into the future. You know, just knowing knowing that there's a sense that, you know, there will be a weight to the decisions you make, and to just think very carefully about it. So I think that kind of is the way it balances out. So yeah.
And in the article, so you touched on it there. You bring up the fact or the idea that because of this sort of loss, the class of 2020 will come out with, I guess, a sense of strength, or potentially a positive, which would, and I guess one of those things would be those ideas of taking things seriously, not taking things for granted. Do you think there are other potential sort of positives or impacts which would come out of this event, which will improve this class?
Yeah, I think, hinging on the point I made earlier, just having this heightened awareness towards uncertainty. You know, I feel like when you're able to handle uncertainty better, where be it just being able to forecast it, or being able to have preparations for it, even if you don't know if it's actually going to happen at all. Always having a backup, always having this idea that, you know, there's something to fall back on if things don't go your way. I think that's a really key key mindset to have, because I've met a lot of people in final year, like, well, let's say they're applying for jobs, and they're saying, I need to get this one thing, if not, I'm not going to live my life anymore, I won't be that person that I've always wanted to be. But I think, you know, emerging from this entire mess and just going through everything that we did go through, it's, you know, knowing that things can go wrong, not that they necessarily would, but, you know, if things don't necessarily go your way 100%, you know, at least know that there's alternatives. Always try to find, you know, always try to make the most out of the situation, because a lot of people, especially in when you're about to graduate, you just kind of lose sense of the fact that, you know, it's not the end of the world. It feels like the end of the world, but it most certainly isn't. Which, yeah, is something that I feel like just is something that becomes very, very poignant, and you become very much more aware to that kind of thing. And on top of just the pandemic, let's say like for the strikes, I think another thing that the cohort would definitely learn from is the fact that, you know, being more aware. And for example, when I was in first year, I didn't know anything about the strikes. I just thought all my classes were canceled, and I thought, yeah, that's great. I don't even go to class anymore. Amazing. And I just kind of, you know, went clubbing a lot, and it was just, you know, I did not know why they were striking. And then, you know, actually going to the strikes, reporting on them, speaking to tutors, learning more about why they're doing what they're doing. So that's, and knowing where to like kind of have that sense of anger and knowing what you can do to help is something that's really important. And I think that's what the cohort is able to do, you know, from going through 2 rounds of strikes, losing about at least a term's worth of teaching. That's kind of what you get out of it. Yeah, I think that's what's really important, just knowing more about what's happening around you, being more aware, and knowing what actually is the culprit of the situation. Obviously, with the pandemic, you can't really like just, you know, concentrate your anger in one place, and, you know, it also isn't a very good way of coping. But I think, you know, emerging from all this is this ability to be aware and to be very conscious. And I think that's going to really help in the future.
So in the article, you also you describe the sort of the bitterness you felt, and I guess still feel, at this at the loss, and you say that there's not an instruction manual for dealing with this sort of situation. What would you say makes this sort of situation a uniquely difficult one to process? And do you have any advice for anyone else potentially on how they could go through this? Because I'm sure your entire year are going to be feeling very similar.
Yeah. I'd say what makes it so much harder to deal with this sense of loss is the physical kind of entrapment, because you can't step out of the house, you can't go anywhere. And obviously if you live in a flat, that's even worse, because at least I'm in a student house, so I have like I can walk around up and down the house if I'm really bored, you know, and I can walk out to the garden, with the tiny garden, just kind of have like some air like blow into my face or whatever. You know, that's just that physical part, because it's not just your mind anymore. It's as of, you know, it's like a manifestation of everything that's happening inside you, just absolutely blowing up in your face and actually happening in real life. So it's not that kind of mental imprisonment of all your worst thoughts with you, and that's the only thing that's with you the entire time. It's really exacerbated by the fact that you are physically just stuck in one place. It really, yeah, it really hurts, and it really doesn't help. You know, you can have all the gym workouts and home workouts you want, but it's just not the same. But then at the same time, that's one of the ways to cope. So having all this energy, you know, having all this time to actually reflect, you know, it could be just, you know, distracting yourself with movies. Like some of the things I've done is basically really get back into cooking, which is, you know, seems menial stuff, but, you know, I've experimented with a lot of things. You know, I was able to make my own bubble tea at home. That feels pretty cool. And afterwards, I'd say, you know, going into creating things in this time of just, you know, this time of just uncertainty, and but at the same time, this time where it's almost like everything's on a pause is also like a time for you to sit down and just think about all the things you used to want to do. So I got back into writing and writing a lot of things. So the class of 2020 was one of them. I'm writing some poetry again. Most of it might probably go into the fact that I need to have my creative writing portfolio, but that's fine, you know, creating things.
Like
You
podcasts.
know, yeah, exactly. I was gonna say just like creating podcasts. And yeah, I had this video essay I had to do, and it actually felt really good to like make something that you can watch over and over again, just feel proud about the fact that you edited an entire video. But yeah, I think the most important part of coping with all this is just talking to people, and, you know, with like Zoom or Skype, like here, literally anything that you can just do to like talk to other people, because you're not alone in the situation. And it's something that's really important to remember, is that, you know, everything that's happening is happening to everyone, and there are a lot of resources out there offering help. So when you feel like you're ready to ask for help, or you can do that, you know. And that's what I'd say is one of the ways to just cope with this extra sense of loss. Is just everyone's lost something out of this, and there's going to be people who are not ready to, you know, talk to other people yet, and that's fine, you know. Everybody has their own process to dealing with things, and now patience is literally the most important virtue you can have right now, because just kind of waiting for better days. Like going back to that point on hope, actually I have a bit of hope that graduation is not completely blown out of the water. You know, even if it's like a postponed graduation in October, like I feel like it's still possible. And yeah, it's just, you know, having that very little tiny bit of hope, just a little bit. Maybe it's like a guilty pleasure, but I mean, just a little bit is no harm.
So throughout the article, I sort of got the feeling that there was a lot of comparisons and a lot of analogies to it being almost like a story, or like a character arc, where, you know, you come in first year, you do your 3 years, you work crazy hard in third year, you know, 3 a.m. library sessions of Red Bulls, as you described. But then now what's happened is that the ending's been lost, or this story that people have been told from the second they got to Warwick has just been, you know, hasn't been completed, because the final act, the celebration, the victory of the character's success has been taken away. Do you sometimes feel that this is like you know, a fantasy story where the last scene, or the celebratory, you know, victory has been ripped away?
Yeah, I do. It just feels like, you know, it's like, okay, so this is just comparing it to everything I've ever watched in the past, like, I don't know, like a few weeks. So Euphoria, it's like this brilliant TV show, but then it's almost like, you know, it's like the seasons, exactly how it ended. The season's just been chopped off, and you don't know what's happening next. And you're just kind of waiting for season 2 to come out, just waiting for a new season of a TV show. Or this, like, it's like you've watched Avengers, like, Avengers Endgame, and you're like, okay, when's Space War gonna come? Or it's like, this is really, oh god, this is a horrible example, but you know, in The Fault in Our Stars, the main character was obsessed with this book that just didn't have an ending, and I feel like we're living in that book. It's just, you know, but also either you treat it as a way of just not having an ending at all, which is, you know, completely just pessimistic, which is understandable, or you treat it as like an unfinished TV show, and the next season's going to come out in some time, and you can binge watch it on Netflix. I do feel like you know, it does feel like a bit like a character, and you're kind of lost in this dystopia. You know, it feels really strange. It does feel kind of fictional. But you know, it's also becoming easier to kind of feel that this is the reality right now. And just finding ways of making this real, but also, you know, making this a learning experience, like something that you'll tell the kids, you know, when you're like, I don't know, like 60, and you're like, yeah, I remember that time in like 2020 when there was a global pandemic, yeah, it was horrible. But yeah, just thinking about it in those terms.
So one of the points you brought up about what would be like a strength for this class leaving would be there'll be a sense of that this group would be more united around, you know, having lost this ceremony. Do you potentially see that this you know, this sense of being united could lead to a sort of, I guess, people finding their own ways to celebrate in the end? You know, there isn't this sort of university official ceremony, or there aren't the facilities to do these sort of things. Do you see any sort of alternatives to try and complete the story? Do you see a way that maybe yourself or your group of friends, or even the whole year, could find their own way to complete the arc?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely see, you know, be it a huge party or a self-organized ceremony. I feel like, yeah, definitely, you know, something's gonna just. I feel like it. I don't know. It's this selfish sense of hope again, or this like you know, guilty pleasure kind of hope. But like, yeah, I do feel like it's possible, and I do feel like it's feasible, even that we will celebrate amongst ourselves that this is over, and you know, because it's just such a huge nationwide thing. This international thing, you know, I feel like people will band together and they will be able to celebrate it somehow, even if it's like, you know, those like big Facebook events where it's like, you know, Naruto run through Hyde Park or whatever. You can definitely, there'll probably be like, you know, thousands of people being interested in like a massive like graduation in like, I don't know, Wales or whatever. It could happen. And I definitely have seen, you know, people banding together, uniting as one, because you see all these petitions going around, and they like get like hundreds and hundreds of signatures in like overnight. And I do think like people, there's like this collective sentiment, and I feel like it's really important to not forget about that.
Mhm. So, what would be, I guess, your final send off words for the class of 2020? You know, to sum up your time at work and sort of this experience. I guess it could be words of advice. It could just be, you know, an expression of how you feel. What could be your send off?
I'd say I'd quote the last few words of my letter again because I started to remember them. Was like the class of 2020 will be with you always. Because it's true, you know, we've all been through this thing together, this entire graduating class that was just robbed of a graduation. Yeah, that I would end with that, and also because it is a Star Wars reference. Um, God, yeah, it's a Star Wars reference from the Rise of Skywalker. Not that I really like that book.
Oh
Whatever.
no, the Rise of Skywalker.
I'm not gonna. Yeah, yeah.
That's a different podcast. That's a whole different podcast.
Yeah, it's a whole different podcast. But I would end with, you know, it is very applicable in the situation. The class of 2020 is with you always, because you know there's just it is such a there's so many people affected by this one thing, and there's so many people writing about it, talking about it, reading about it. You know, it's just, yeah, you know, we're with you, you know, and you're not alone. That's really important. I go with ending with that kind of a sentiment.
Perfect. Well then, Evian, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
This has been amazing. Everyone follow Evian on Twitter at Evian Swen. Swen spelled Suen. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. For more articles, more poems, occasionally some song recommendations. I saw that the other day.
Thank you.
What else can we be expecting? Anything else from multi-award winning journalist Evian Swen coming up in the future?
You know what? Hopefully, I'll just get to write more. You know, more poetry, more creative stuff. You know, just taking a break from the journalistic investigation stuff. Not that I've forgotten about it. I'm still very much engaged in that, but just taking a break, and then afterwards, it'll be back to producing and writing and just reading and just many words. So, yeah.
Perfect. Well then, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Hope everyone enjoyed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.